As I was debating what exact facet of the wonderful net neutrality debate to speak on, one subject came to mind, and that was whether or not people who run for office should be required to support this in the aftermath of whatever the vote is this upcoming December 12th or 14th. I still haven't figured out which date it is. Um, and one might say, okay, but what's the big deal of having people that state, "Oh, I'm opposed to this"? Well, when you know what that person's views are, a lot of times we don't focus entirely on one particular thing that a person might view that is radical or otherwise not agreed by a majority of people. So, for example, it's been proven in polling that a solid 60% of Americans are in favor of same sex marriage. Um, but if a person was opposed to that, while I and people who don't partake in getting married to someone of the same sex might say, okay, well, what's the big deal? Someone who is affected by this, i.e., a person who wants to marry someone that is the same sex as them, will be bothered and go, whoa, and proceed to not support or otherwise be content with having that person in office and representing them, because that person doesn't represent that one facet of their life that is, in their view, very important: their right to get married. So, if you have people who, for example, don't use the internet, they'll think, okay, what's the problem with net neutrality being repealed? What's the problem with this person being opposed to it? Well, even if their position doesn't require them or doesn't allow them the power to get rid of it or to do anything necessarily against it currently being in place, knowing that they want to mess with it can spare us the possibility of getting someone in office that's going to bother or otherwise harm this thing that many people are in favor of and will be affected by if such a thing occurs. Now, I didn't really notice the party disparity here because as I've stated before, I'm not into either party. I think they both have major gaping problems. But there is this tendency among Republican candidates, such as Senator Cruz or Jeb Bush, who both ran for president last year, to be opposed to net neutrality, and it freaked me out because those were issues they didn't focus on. They didn't make central to their campaign theme. They would have been able to trick people who use the internet, who benefit from net neutrality, into voting for them and into supporting their platform. One can say, oh, you shouldn't be a one issue voter. Well, I try not to be, but you have to remember, even if they don't do anything to it, just as Trump is not necessarily doing something to net neutrality just by not liking it, which his position I'm not entirely familiar with, he still appointed someone that has opposed it for years, who has spoken about getting rid of it, who has stated outright, I want this to be gone. I want this to just cease existing. So when you have someone that supports that viewpoint or that vantage point, it's not hard to believe that they're not going to put someone in place that reflects their viewpoints on that matter. And really, it's almost befuddling to me that we have 80% of well over 80% of people that live in the U.S. that benefit from service providers not being able to mess with these websites, who are continuously not trying to hold these politicians accountable for just acting in manners that I don't think benefit any of us, supporting things that do not benefit us. And we can talk about corporate influence, which I think that ties to a lot of it, but we as people do not have the influence of anyone aside from ourselves and those in our immediate vicinity. And in being free from the corporate influence that these politicians have, we can try to enact things that are favoring of people, that are by popular consensus. And one of those should be to have a fair and free internet that doesn't get barred in this way. And for the one person that just came in, the gist of what I'm saying is that I think there's grounds for why we should have net neutrality be a requirement in terms of what you support in having a platform for a campaign. So we had several Republican candidates last year who stated they were opposed to net neutrality, and no one took them seriously. And that was partially due to the fact that they can't just say, oh, yes, I'm going to get rid of this. But they can appoint someone who will say, yes, we're going to get rid of this, i.e., Trump appointing Agent Pie, a known person against net neutrality, to be chairman of the FCC. So I'm saying this, having those viewpoints can lead to this, even if the people who have those views can't, within their own office or within their current position, do anything to it. That makes sense to you. So I think I've ranted for enough, and I'll have something else up about this topic and others. I tried to have a little bit more of a variety, but I have to keep speaking about it until we get that vote. And even from that point onward, it won't be daily, but it will be, this is a matter that needs to be focused on and made a central part of what I'm regularly covering that makes sense to those viewing.